Well, there you have it. Lagos and Ogun State residents have lamented the effects of the continuous rainfall in several parts of the states, which led to floods that damaged their vehicles and other properties. Some of the affected areas are Marina, Lekki, Agege, Iju Road, Victoria Island, Oshodi, Agor Palace, Ilupeju, Ogudu, Ketu, and Magboro, among other parts of the states, where some of the damaged vehicles and other living room items like chairs and television sets, among others, could be seen. The pressing question is there an end in sight to this recurring pattern? And joining us to make sense of this is Dr. Leke Ebenezer. He's an economist. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Leke.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show this morning.
All right. Well, looking at what we have with us right now, according to the victims who lamented their losses, losing several millions and all of that, we also see that this is an annual problem. And then it feels like the government probably isn't paying enough attention to this. What exactly is the issue? Dr. Ebenezer, if you can hear me, I was saying that, well, this is a recurring, something that keeps happening over and over again. And then, we're beginning to wonder if government is probably doing something or not doing something, or if government is doing something, how effective is it? And why do we have this recurring all the time? If you can hear me, please go on.
Okay, thank you very much. I can hear you. Given the fact that Nigeria, as it were, the record has it that 27 states out of the 36 states are prone to flood. And, the annual flood outlook by the government has always been a kind of document that they prepare from time to time to analyze the impact of flood and what possibly can be done. In 2012 alone, about 30 out of the 36 states were really, really affected by flood, and a lot of people died. About 1.3 million people were displaced. And fast forward to 2019, you have about over 277,000 people affected by flood, and 158 people killed, as recorded by, of course, NEMA. And, all of these records have shown that there are four basic factors that are contributing to flooding. The normal standard that is expected per kilometer square is 112 people per kilometer square. But, in Lagos alone and some other states, you have about 20,000 people per kilometer square. So population density is one of the major factors that is really, really affecting flood, because as people are increasing in number, structural adjustments as to construction and as to building plans and urbanization, they are not really, really put into consideration when, they are trying to look at the number of people that should be in a place vis-a-vis the effects in the future as regards to flood. And all of these factors, the government have been trying to manage them, but it's a pity that if the government can manage the structural risk management of flood, the non-structural parts cannot be managed by the government. And what does that mean? That has to do with government cannot really control.
All right, that's Dr. Ebenezer. I guess that's a connection issue. If you can hear me, please go on ahead. But of course, it was talking about the causes why we keep having this flood. He said some of these things could be structural and some are not structural. Well, for him, for the structural risk management, that's something that government can work on. And then that's where the whole population density comes in and some other issues, which we'll definitely discuss coming. But then he was also talking about the non-structural aspect, where it's not necessarily what the government can do. Please go ahead if you can hear me.
Okay, so thank you very much. So like I said, if government want to approach the issue of flooding, there are, the causes can be divided into two parts, the structural and the non-structural. And, I was talking about the structural that has to do with looking at building structure, urbanization pattern, looking at drainages and their connections to one another. But the non-structural part, which has to do with population density, the number of people living in a particular area, and then two, the waste disposal by the people that are living in that place. You know, there are some things government cannot do. It is human error that is going to cause flood. And so looking at all of this holistically, if government really want to solve this issue, two approaches are needed. They have to look at it from the structural measure and, of course, also look at the non-structural measure. And, of course, the structural measure include when, you know, government now try to look at the drainages, the pattern of construction, looking at urbanization measures. And
Dr. Ebenezer, well, please, you can hold on that thought. We'll take a break now. And when we return, we'll continue the conversation. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. We still have Dr. Leke Ebenezer joining us virtually. Hello, Doctor. Good to have you join us again. If you can hear me, Doctor, before we went on that break, you were talking about the structural risk management and non-structural risk management. So we'll actually like you to continue on that thought, so you help us understand these causes and how we can actually solve this issue. Please go ahead if you can hear me.
Okay, so thank you very much. So like I was saying, based on the fact that the flood drivers are basically divided into two, so the government will have to look at it from two angles, which has to do with the structural measures and the non-structural measure. And I was trying to say the structural measures, of course, include when you are looking at construction of drainage channel, you are looking at dredging and maintenance of rivers, you are looking at placement and break of water along part of the coast, and of course you are also looking at the flooding. So those are all the measures government needs to put in place when they are looking at the structural measure. Then for the non-structural measure, they have to focus more on emergency management, floodplain regulation, information and education. They need to educate a lot of people as to the way they treat their disposal. A lot of people, once they see flood, especially in areas that are highly congested, one way they dispose their being is through the flood. And if a lot of education, of course, government have tried a lot in that area, educating people to make sure that they understand that if you block all the drainages through your debt, it will come back on you and destroy your properties and your valuables. So, a lot of measures that government have put in place before now, most of the time, the non-structural part of the flood risk management has always been what has been affecting us, down to where we are. Because when you look at the structural measure, government have tried in the area of clearing some of the drainages and all the buildings you have on some of the canals that are major link, have been demolished. But when you look at the non-structural factors, like the way people behave when it comes to disposing their waste bin, the way people behave when it comes to building structures and not minding the effect on their neighbor. And that is
let me come in here. When you say the way people behave without minding the effect on their neighbor, one would have expected that regulatory agencies that are charged with this responsibility will do the needful. We have the town planning, we have some of these regulatory agencies that are supposed to be able to say, no, you can't build here. If you're going to build here, this has to be here. That has to be put in place. So if these regulatory agencies are not doing what they are supposed to do, should we then blame the people for doing what they think is right? Please go on.
Yes, I can hear you. I said this question is on two parts. There is we have the problem from the side of the government, and also we have the problem from the side of the people. Yeah, you were right when you said the management structure that we put in place for things like this. The agency that is responsible, like NEMA and the likes, are expected to ensure that they avoid or they stop people from doing what can influence, this flood effect. But then, number one, if you look at uh, that agency, they are not adequately staffed. They are short staffed, given the fact that the geometrical growth rates and population density is far more than what the government can cope with in terms of the employment they are doing in that agency to monitor people. Then, number two, is also the fact that most of these agencies are not properly funded due to lack of fund. So, and government felt there are other important things in the economy than paying attention to some of these agencies that will be gulping money. But that's not to say they are not to perform their duty. But then when you look at it from the side of the people, it is the people that are bearing the brunt.
Okay, so Dr. Ebenezer was talking about the fact that at the end of the day, it's the people who suffer it. And so even though we have the government having its own lapses on the one hand, on the other hand, the people should also ensure that they do not do things that will come back and hurt them. If you can hear me, please go ahead.
Okay, so for me, what is most important is that when you want to solve a problem, try to look at which part or which side of the party is bearing more brunt of the problem, and try to look at it from that angle. And that's why I said it is important that we as a people, we have to look at our drainages. We have to check that we are disposing our waste properly, and we have to ensure that if our neighbor is doing something that can bring side effect of flood, we should report. And if we do that, it is to our own advantage. That is not to exonerate the government. The government needs to do a lot in the area of controlling flood, given the fact that, there are some structural monitoring that the government are not doing as they supposed.
Dr. Ebenezer, let me come in here. Earlier while you were talking, you talked about education. Now, and not only that, we look at the fact that the Nigeria Hydrological Service Agency had actually issued a warning talking about the fact that there will be floods. So one would have expected that there should be commensurate action. For example, maybe from the state government and federal government, one would have expected some of these jingles to be running, because I remember as far back as, I think, 2014, 2015 in Lokoja, Kogi State, it was the same song on radio and television, warning people, telling people to depart certain areas because of their closeness to the water. Some of these things were going on, and people were making efforts to ensure that the flood didn't affect them the way it affected them in 2012. But we didn't really see much of that happening this year, irrespective of the fact that we had a warning from NIHSA.
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right, please go on ahead. Please respond to that.
Okay, I didn't really get what you are saying, but then if I can pick what I can get from what you said, it's about the fact that the government is trying in its own capacity to ensure that they are informing the people as to doing things that will not, increase the chances or the damage or the severity of flood when it comes. You also have to look at the fact that flooding is basically coming from two angles. You are looking at the factors that.
Okay, that's Dr. Ebenezer. He's been talking about this particular issue we're looking at the moment, which is flooding, how we can actually put an end to the destruction that comes with it. All right, go ahead. Please continue.
So like I said, when you are looking at basically the cause of flood, there is one that is as a result of climate change, and there's one that is as a result of socioeconomic change. Now, the one that is of socioeconomic change is driven by three factors. I said high population, high level of urbanization, and solid waste generation. The population density is growing faster and faster. Like I said, in Nigeria, you are having like 20,000 people per kilometer squared compared to the normal required standard of 112 people per kilometer squared. So, and those people will generate solid waste. And when they generate those solid waste and there's no proper waste management, some of them are likely to dispose this waste and block drainages and canals that can make, water to flow if there's heavy rainfall. And so all of these are what the information of the federal government is focusing on to ensure that, look, when it comes to generation of solid waste, these are the ways to treat your waste. When it comes to urbanization, what can we do in that regard? And of course, government is trying to see what they can do in that regard, and also the high level of population. And like I said, if out of 36 states, 27 states are susceptible to flood, what that implies is that government really needs to look at, okay, the drivers of flood, which are basically three from the angle of socioeconomic change, we need to address them. Then from the angle of climate change, we also need to ensure that, okay, what are we doing about heavy rainstorm, increasing frequency and surges, and sea level rise? What are the plans that we are putting in place as regards that? So for me, government needs to do a lot of work in the area of climate change, which cannot be handled by the people. They are the only one who can put measures in place to solve that. But in the area of socioeconomic change, which has to do with population, urbanization, and generation of solid waste, we the people really need to do something about that as much as we can. And if we can work together from those two angles, I want to believe that, with the structural measures that are put in place by the government and the non-structural measures that are put in place by the people, before you know it, we can reduce the impact of flood, and we can reduce the loss of property and, lives that are being, caused as a result of the flood.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leke Ebenezer. Thanks for the thoughts you shared with us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Well, we've been speaking with Dr. Leke Ebenezer. He's an economist, and he's spoken to us about, what needs to be done both by the government and also by the people. Well, we'll take a break now, and when we return, U.S. employment rate held steady at 3.6%, still close to the 52-year low last reached in the months before the pandemic hit. Details in a moment. Stay with us.